From Kansas State University, this is Agriculture Today. Eric Atkinson here. Coming up today, K-State's Glynn Tonsor telling of a brand new study he co-authored which investigated the impact of plant-based protein products on consumer demand for beef here in the U.S. This was done by way of a national survey. And Glynn tells us that, in general, beef scores pretty well in the majority of the findings. Also today, K-State's Dale Blasi previewing the 108th Cattlemen's Day here at K-State. It'll be presented virtually this year. He'll highlight the keynote speakers who'll address the effects of the pandemic on the U.S. beef industry. Further ahead, this week's horticulture segment where K-State's Londa Nwadike will talk about a series of produce safety workshops coming up soon. All this and more here on Agriculture Today.
A social distancing tip.
Putting distance between yourself and others is critical to slowing the spread of coronavirus. So here are ways to stay in contact without the physical contact part. Call, send a text, set up a video conference, post on social media, dedicate a song on the radio. If you have symptoms of fever, dry cough, and shortness of breath, call your healthcare provider before going to their office. For more info, visit coronavirus.gov.
Let's all do our part, because we're all #AloneTogether. Brought to you by the Ad Council.
This is Agriculture Today. As always, glad to have you aboard. Well, a lingering question since the debut of those plant-based protein products that were promoted as alternatives to beef and other meat products. How will these new market entries affect beef demand? Well, that was the subject of a detailed new study conducted by two Kansas State University livestock economists and a counterpart at Purdue University recently, and their findings have just been released. Joining us once again is K-State Research and Extension livestock economist Glynn Tonsor. This is a rather exhaustive effort, and we'll talk about it, Glynn, but put it in your words as to the purpose of this study.
Yeah, so first I'll give credit to the team. So it was myself, Ted Schroeder here at K-State, and then Jason Lusk, a friend and colleague at Purdue University, as you say. Cattlemen's Beef Board asked us to dive in and answer the question, what is the impact of these plant-based proteins coming onto the market on U.S. beef demand and narrowly domestic demand? So this has nothing to do with exports. Embedded in that, we were interested in what is the impact separately in the retail side, so grocery store, as well as from food service restaurant. That was the main motivation and focus of the project. Real quickly to kind of tell people what we did, we planned, this was actually an approved study in 2019, and then that little thing called COVID came about and threw us a wrench. We were scheduled to collect data and do the analysis early in 2020. We hit pause because of that, and actually a large consumer survey and 4 separate consumer experiments were part of this effort. All that data was collected actually in September of 2020, and then the months since then we've done lots of analysis and write-up and get you to the final report and executive summary, as you said.
Well, you had several parts to this. The scope of that survey, this was a national endeavor, wasn't it?
It was. So the final data set we use is we have over 3,000 consumers, and it is nationally representative. So, there's more respondents from California than there is Kansas because the population's bigger. It's representative on age, education, income, things like that. We also make important distinctions between consumers based upon their self-declaration of diet. So when you read the full report, you'll see 68 to 70% of the public, depending on what analysis in our report you're looking at, are what we call regular meat consumers. So that's somebody that says they would describe their diet as regularly consume meat or items from animals. And that includes fish and seafood also, if you're reading the details. That leaves the other roughly 30% of the public, and the respondents here, that we call the alternative diet. So this would be vegan, vegetarian, flexitarian, or other if you chose a different item. And that's important because we find several differences in acceptance of these products, substitution effects against beef, how much more you're willing to pay for one product versus another, which we're going to get to here in a minute. But there's big differences between the regular meat consumer group, which again is 2/3 or more of the public, and the other third, which at least to date is more accepting of these plant-based alternatives.
That was the survey component, plus more information digging, to put it that way?
There was. So, I'm trying to set the stage without being too geeky here. We have 4 experiments. So each person that walked through that was part of our project got one of those 4. And I'll just give you an example of one of them. Something that has happened over several months now is restaurants are adding a plant-based item from a certain company, right? It varies over time, to their menu options. So we mimic that, and we actually say, what would you pick if you're at a restaurant when you had a couple of beef items, so a regular beef burger and a bacon beef burger, chicken sandwich, a chicken wrap, what would you pick at these different prices, blah, blah, blah. And then we set up the situation, what if that chicken wrap option was removed from the menu, just because this has happened over time, and a plant-based item was added in? Now what would you change? Our core interest there is, how does the selection of the beef burger and the bacon beef burger change in that adjustment? So we dive into that, and we find those effects are actually pretty small, to paraphrase on what's going on here. That's an example of what we did on the restaurant side. An example on the retail side is we put you in the frame, you're going through the grocery store, and there's these two plant-based items from two leading companies that are there, a Tyson chicken breast, and examples like that were there, a store brand ground beef. What would you pick across these different prices, blah, blah, blah. And from that, we can figure out how price-sensitive your selection of, for example, store brand ground beef is, and how does that change as the price of plant-based items change. So we're trying to mimic how consumer selections adjust as a plant-based item either enters the market, hence my example on the restaurant side, or as the prices of those products change, both of which are key economic drivers of activity on the protein selection for consumers. And we try to summarize in this report what we think is the net impact of that on U.S. consumer selection and ultimately beef demand.
Well, then you have all sorts of dynamics here within this. But let's get into what you describe as the key findings of this entire effort and what they mean to the beef industry in as far as competition from plant-based proteins.
Yeah, so I find it most helpful to break that in two. So let's kind of highlight some of the main findings and then do the implications. Some of the key findings are prior day meals. So we asked like a recall question, what did you consume yesterday? Beef is consumed 3 times as often as plant-based proteins today. So beef is still leading in that prevalence in the protein basket, so to speak. That's not surprising. We just kind of reaffirm that. Beef has what we call a good image, and we document it as a good image throughout the report. There's a litany of survey questions. How does beef compare to plant-based proteins on lots of different dimensions? So taste, safety, price, on nutritional content, protein, iron, so forth, even on broader assessments, good for farmers, good for the planet, good for consumers. So we have a litany of those inquiries in the report. Those folks can go look at those if they like. But as a general statement across all those, beef has a good image. It ranks well, is what I'm trying to say here, for the average consumer. And that is good as an underpinning. And it's not surprising if beef is being consumed 3 times as often. It's consistent with that good view from consumers. Then we get into, now I got to use some numbers, the key finding differences between the regular meat consumers and the alternative diet folks. I'm going to rattle off 4 specific findings to give a flavor for this. Regular meat consumers are willing to pay, we estimate, $1.87 per meal more for a beef burger meal than a meal that's based on a plant-based item, making a restaurant choice. That differs for an alternative meat consumer, so somebody that doesn't label themselves a regular meat consumer is actually willing to pay $1.48 more per meal for the plant-based item. So notice the big difference there. Embedded in that, prices of plant-based items would have to decline $1.87 per meal before a regular meat consumer would be willing to purchase the plant-based item. So that's our restaurant finding. There's a big preference among regular meat consumers at a restaurant today for the beef burger, and there's a strong preference among the alternative diet folks for those newly offered items. Now, flip over to retail. Regular meat consumers willing to pay 29 cents per pound more for store brand lean ground beef than a plant-based item. So they're willing to pay more. Again, those prices have to come down 29 cents per pound before you change what you put in your basket for that roughly 70% of the population. Those that declare an alternative diet that we don't describe here as regular meat consumers are willing to pay $2.32 per pound more for a plant-based item instead of the store brand ground beef item. So big distinction among our population. Regular meat consumers, strong preference for beef items. Alternative diet declares pretty strong preference actually for the plant-based items. And that's not surprising to me, is we have a lot of heterogeneity throughout our whole population of over 300 million, and that shapes up throughout this whole report. Targeting your message and the product and seeing who is going to make these substitutions is the real world, evolution of how protein choices change, and that diversity of findings speaks to that.
As you analyze this, and again, Glynn, we did advise producers and others interested to have a look at the full report and get a grasp of all of what you've gathered here. What does this say to the beef industry in as far as responding to the presence of plant-based alternative products in the marketplace and whether they're, to put it this way bluntly, a threat to beef consumption.
Yep, and I'll answer that question, partly based upon this study and some just Glynn's opinions in other realms. So I'll make that disclosure so I'm not, this isn't Ted and Jason's words on answering that one. First and foremost, I think it's important to recognize that the number of proteins available for consumers to choose from is always changing. The plant-based items are just the newest on that list. Global demand for protein is strong. I fully expect new types of protein to come about. This is just the latest on that list, and the beef industry needs to recognize that. Second is, a key point is, we actually find beef price and chicken price to be bigger determinants of beef selection than plant-based price. So the extent to which major substitution is going to happen in the near term, we don't expect that to occur a lot simply because of price changes. Things you can do to make the beef industry more cost competitive or monitoring what's going on in the chicken industry have a lot more direct economic relevance than coming down prices of plant-based items. In the near term, at least, that's a key finding here. The other part of this is, remember my comment about the good image and taste, safety, ingredient lists, those kind of things. Those are the specific things where beef has a large advantage over plant-based, in the eye of the consumers. The industry needs to, in my opinion, sustain and build upon taste, safety, price. That is a key differentiation point we find in this study. And maybe more importantly is, for several studies, some of our listeners know, myself, Jason and Ted and others have done lots of beef demand work over time. We regularly find taste and safety in particular are key protein purchasing determinants. They are key drivers of U.S. beef demand. So doubling down to sustain that and build upon it is important just in aggregate overall demand story, and even more narrowly for our discussion today of sustaining a difference between beef and plant-based. So those are several of the punchlines and recommendations that come from this work.
It's interesting, to say the very least, what you've come up with here. And we would invite you, if so interested, to have a look at the entire write-up on this new work out of K-State. It's entitled Impacts of New Plant-Based Protein Alternatives on U.S. Beef Demand, and it is found right now on the agmanager.info website. It's quite insightful on this question. Glynn, thanks for covering it in brief with us today.
Thanks for having me on, Eric.
One of the co-authors of this work, Glynn Tonsor, livestock economist with K-State Research and Extension, along with colleague Ted Schroeder of K-State and Jason Lusk of Purdue University. Again, have a look at agmanager.info. More coming your way shortly. You're listening to Agriculture Today.
For information on threatening weather, you should depend on the National Weather Service and their broadcast on NOAA Weather Radio. NOAA Weather Radio is an all-hazards radio network that provides up-to-the-minute weather information, including life-saving warnings anytime, day or night. NOAA Weather Radio also broadcasts information on man-made disasters, such as chemical spills, Amber Alerts, or other national emergencies. For the National Weather Service, I'm Bill Curtis.
Agriculture Today continues now. And full details coming your way on a time-honored event here on the Kansas State University campus. But this year, as is the case with so many other things, it will be delivered in a different fashion. We're talking about Cattlemen's Day 2021. This is the 108th edition, coming up on March the 5th. That's a Friday. Along with us, Dale Blasi, beef cattle specialist, K-State Research and Extension. And as usual, Dale's very much instrumental in the planning of Cattlemen's Day, as he has been for a number of years now. Because of the pandemic restrictions, this will be an online event for the first time ever, Dale.
That's right, Eric. I'm thankful at least we are able to hold and maintain the tradition with respect to Cattlemen's Day. I understand back in the 40s there was a period of time there during the World War II that Cattlemen's Day was suspended. So we have a long-standing tradition, and we're doing everything at our level best to ensure that we have some degree of continuity.
And one thing, it is a free event now because of its virtual nature.
That's right. The program will kick off at 9:30. We tried to tailor it around our working producers. They'll be right in the middle of calving. An opportunity to get the cows fed and come in and listen for a couple hours to pick up on some of the latest in our industry.
Well, let's get right to the content, if we might. And to build around, you've 3 individuals coming in to take up a topic which is pertinent, obviously. That is the impact of the pandemic on the U.S. beef industry.
That's right. And I think because of we've been able to assemble some individuals that otherwise, with our traditional nature, probably would not have even considered. But bringing in Dr. Jason Lusk from Purdue, he did some really good work with Dr. Glynn Tonsor, and he's going to talk about the impacts of the pandemic on the U.S. beef industry. And so we're looking forward to hearing Dr. Lusk's comments.
And of course, Jason Lusk has roots as a student here at K-State on the faculty at Oklahoma State University before traveling to his post at Purdue. Looking forward to his comments. And another couple of commentators will take a look at the processing, retail, and food services side of the industry currently.
That's right, and we really tried to bring an industry flair to this program as well. And in talking with our good friends at U.S. Premium Beef, they recommended that we follow up and just check these 2 gentlemen out with the Radian Group. And as was explained to me, the Radian Group, whom they both represent, would be comparable to the Cattle Facts organization that our cattle feeders utilize for their market outlook and information. So they're going to address the processing, retail, and the food service impacts, as well as what we can anticipate to see down the road.
Again, the word on that to be shared by Jason Rumley and Robert Norris, both of the Radian Group. And we might mention, as with all of the speakers, these 3 will be availing themselves for questions and answers toward the latter part of the formal presentations, right?
That is correct, Eric. We want the ability for folks to make their questions known, for each of these 3 speakers to give a response as they would in Weber 123.
In addition, a couple of your colleagues in K-State Animal Science will be covering specific topics. Talk about those.
Well, Dr. Sandy Johnson, she's one of our beef extension specialists. She's out in northwest Kansas, but every year it has become somewhat of a tradition. But Dr. Johnson really stays on top of the reproductive synchronization programs and stuff. And every year, the attendance to the sessions that she provides in the afternoon is very well attended. And so that speaks highly to the information that she's able to share. And so she is one of our speakers. It's just a short 15-minute or so presentation, but it's going to be hard-hitting and basically allow our folks tuned in to get the latest, greatest from the bovine reproductive world, if you will.
So you'll be able to hear what Sandy has to say and to tap her for thoughts on your repro approach to your herd, and K-State's Liz Boyle on small Kansas meat processors, which entered the limelight during the pandemic.
That's right. And the small Kansas processors, since starting in April, May of last year, were pounded from folks that as a consequence of what was happening to our larger scale processors. And we're seeing folks that are 6 months, 1 year, year and a half out from scheduling a harvest date for their beef animals. And so Dr. Boyle has been working very closely with the Kansas Department of Ag to try to rectify the situation. And she is very much abreast of all of the scenarios and situations and government programs that might be available to help elevate this much needed industry for our smaller Kansas communities.
So good material through and through during the formal presentations, followed by that question and answer session, and all will be wrapped up by the end of the morning then, Dale?
Yes, we're planning on questions and answers by noon. So our producers, like I said earlier, they'll be able to get out there, feed the cows, and tune in and get a couple hours update on where things are at. And we'll just take it from there and look forward to having a normal, traditional Cattlemen's Day in 2022.
So as far as being part of this, registration details, so to speak, what's required?
Well, all we ask are that folks go to ksubeef.org, and there's right on the front homepage there, as you click on that ksubeef.org, you register, and you'll receive all the necessary information, the link, details, and so forth to join us.
Excellent. Again, it's Friday, March the 5th, Cattlemen's Day 2021 at Kansas State University virtually. Now, traditionally, there are other allied events associated with Cattlemen's Day. One will take place on the 5th. The other has been deferred a bit, but that one is the annual Legacy Bull and Female Sale. That is still a go, actually, with in-person participation.
As I understand it, yes. The Legacy Sale is scheduled at 4 p.m. I visited with Dr. Dave Nichols, the coordinator for our purebred beef unit, and we have 40 feed efficiency tested bulls and basically 35 head of cow-calf pairs and bred heifers that will be for sale. So I think we're going to have a good program, and certainly to wrap up that day, we're going to have one of our traditional legacy sales, if you will.
That'll be at 4 o'clock at the Stanley Stout Center. But if one would like to view the bulls, they can do so in advance online, the lots.
That is correct.
And that is at asi.ksu.edu/legacy sale to learn more about that or to request a sale catalog. But again, the 44th annual Legacy Bull and Female Sale, 4 o'clock the afternoon of the 5th. We also often talk about, as an aligned event, the annual Stockman's Dinner, the 2021 version, postponed, but it is apparently rescheduled, right?
That's correct. This year's 2021 Stockman's Dinner, as it stands today, is tentatively scheduled for Friday, May the 21st, to honor Mr. Pat Coons as this year's Stockman of the Year.
That's coming together as we speak. Folks can go to the Animal Science and Industry Department website for more details, Dale?
That is the recommendations, is to check in at the KSU ASI website as well as our Facebook page, basically as the date and location announcements come. But we are shooting for the Stanley Stout Building, and people can mark their calendars for Friday, May 21st.
Honoring longtime leader in the Kansas beef cattle industry, Pat Coons, with the Stockman's Dinner, Friday, May the 21st. But as per Cattlemen's Day proper, yes, it's a little different this year, Dale, but you've made a successful attempt to pack the program with good information, and it's worth producers' while to get online that morning and take it in.
That's right, Eric, and I got to tell you, myself and colleagues in animal sciences have done, I think, an excellent job. And talking with Dr. Joel DeRushi this morning, the youth 4-H program in our department, they've had some phenomenal programs online for our young people. Our KSU swine team and my colleagues on the beef team as well. We've done several of these programs to try to bring the latest and greatest information for our producers during this challenging time in our history.
And the latest version of that in the form of Cattlemen's Day online. Best of luck with it, Dale, and thanks for letting us know what's ahead. Appreciate it.
Thank you, Eric.
The 108th Cattlemen's Day at Kansas State University, an online format on Friday, March the 5th. That is traditional, the first Friday in March. To find out how to link into it via the Zoom platform, go to ksubeef.org. All the details in full right there at ksubeef.org. Again, don't forget that annual Legacy Bull and Female Sale, and that'll take place at 4 o'clock in the afternoon here on campus. 40 feed efficiency tested bulls on offer, as well as 20 fall-bred females and 21 commercial heifers, and a featured lot, choice of full sisters to flush. Again, go to asi.ksu.edu/legacy sale for a complete rundown, including how to obtain a catalog, if you're so inclined. A lot going on your behalf on March the 5th, cattle producers. Take advantage of it. You're listening to Agriculture Today. Now we'll stand aside for a few moments. When we return, we'll have today's agricultural news headlines, this week's edition of the Kansas Soybean Update with Greg Akagi, and much more for you here on the K-State Radio Network.
Have you ever thought about where your food comes from? If you're thinking the grocery store, think again. Facts show that the American farmer feeds more than 129 people.
They are continually increasing and improving their operations. A wide variety of crops and livestock are grown in Kansas as well as the United States, providing food to your dinner plate.
Next time you see a farmer or rancher, thank them. For more information, contact K-State Research and Extension.
You are tuned in to Agriculture Today, coming to you from the campus of Kansas State University. Eric Atkinson here. Now today's agricultural news headlines briefly for you, courtesy in part of DTN. Leaders from major commodity groups yesterday said that farmers would see negative impacts if Mosaic Company wins the decision to have the federal government place countervailing duties on phosphate fertilizer coming from Morocco and Russia. If those tariffs go through, the commodity groups warn, there would be few places in the world for U.S. companies to buy phosphate fertilizer without paying tariffs. The American Soybean Association, National Corn Growers Association, and the National Cotton Council of America stated that tariffs on imported phosphorus would adversely affect crop production and farmer livelihoods, in their words in joint comments to the U.S. International Trade Commission. The groups stated the new duties on imported phosphate fertilizers would raise prices more than $80 per ton, decreasing farmer income by $800 million in the process. Now, the corn, cotton, and soybean commodity groups were stressing in this letter to the Commission that the countervailing duties would affect the availability of phosphorus and lead to shortages. Mosaic filed a petition last summer against Moroccan and Russian companies, and last week the U.S. Commerce Department determined that Morocco and Russia are unfairly subsidizing phosphorus through loans, tax breaks, and other forms of government aid and influence. The Commerce Department recommended countervailing duties ranging from 9 to 47%, depending on the supplier. The U.S. International Trade Commission is expected to hand down its decision on this in March. If that commission reaches the same conclusion as the Commerce Department, then the countervailing duties would go into effect for the next 5 years. Disaster assistance programs through the Farm Service Agency are now available for livestock producers and other producers impacted by our current run with Arctic cold weather. The USDA's Rod Bain has the story on that.
A devastating Arctic outbreak in much of the nation's midsection and southern tier has meant a range of issues, from severe power outages to fatalities. From the farm perspective, that also means potential crop freezes and livestock mortalities in some locales. To that end, USDA's Farm Service Agency has programs available to assist impacted producers.
The Livestock Indemnity Program, producers need to know that there is a program that helps compensate them for those livestock deaths.
FSA Acting Administrator Steve Peterson says assistance is also available via the Livestock Honeybees and Farm-Raised Fish Program, which helps cover feed losses. And for tree fruit growers in Texas and the southern tier,
the Tree Assistance Program is available to help cost share on any rehabilitation or replanting requirements as a result of damage or tree destruction to keep those trees viable. And that's trees, bushes, or vines, so it would be for grapes, citrus trees, or any bush-type plants, whether that be blueberries, etc.
I'm Rod Bain reporting for the U.S. Department of Agriculture in Washington, D.C.
The Kansas Livestock Foundation is now offering a new scholarship, and Scarlett Higgins reports here it's thanks to a partnership with Central Life Sciences.
Cattle producers can help support scholarships for students in Kansas through their purchase of feed or mineral that includes the feed-through hornfly control Alticid IGR. For every ton purchased between now and May 31st, Central Life Sciences will donate $10 to a scholarship fund established through the Kansas Livestock Foundation. Once a purchase is made, visit alticidigr.com/rebate to submit proof of qualifying purchases. The Alticid IGR $1,000 scholarship will be part of the slate of scholarships offered by the Kansas Livestock Foundation for the 2021 through 22 school year. Any college student entering their junior or senior year or higher at Kansas State University or Fort Hays State University and pursuing a degree in agriculture is qualified to apply for the new scholarship. Preference will be given to students majoring in animal science with a career goal of being actively engaged in livestock production or veterinary services. The application and a full list of scholarships to be awarded and individual recipient requirements for each can be found by going to KLA.org and clicking on Programs. Applicants only have to submit one application but will be considered for all scholarships for which they are eligible. The number of scholarships awarded in each category will be dependent upon the number of qualified applicants and funds available. I'm Scarlett Higgins.
And this is Agriculture Today. Next up for you, this week's version of the Kansas Soybean Update. And awaiting with that, as always, is Greg Akagi. Greg?
Mace Thornton, Vice President of Communications and Marketing Strategy with the United Soybean Board, is joining us. And a lot of exciting news, Mace, concerning the U.S. soy industry, including new use successes and new soy-based products that have been shared recently.
First of all, I want to thank our checkoff partners at the Kansas Soybean Commission for helping get the word out about soy. Soybeans are found far beyond the farm gate these days. The fact remains that when you break down soybeans, about 80% is meal, 20% is oil. 90% of that meal goes into animal feed and about 3% goes into human food. On the oil side, about 68% goes into food, about 7% goes into industrial uses, and about 25% goes into biodiesel and bioheat. As a result of a lot of the strategic investments made through the soy checkoff, there are about 1,000 different soy-based products available on the market today.
And another part of this is the work that USB and the soy industry has done looking at sustainable U.S. soy.
We are in the middle of a pilot program to introduce a trademark, Sustainable U.S. Soy, and we are working with a couple of companies from now through the end of March, Soylent and DuPont Nutrition and Biosciences, which is now officially called IFF. Those companies are going to be using the soy mark really to recognize that soy ingredients that originated from a system of continuous improvement at the farm level. So the goal of this innovation is to improve sustainability, to work through our supply chains from farm to fork. And really it's based on a lot of research that our affiliates did that show that simply by having this trademark on their packaging, it really can motivate purchases.
And the recent U.S. dietary guidelines had much more inclusion for soy into the diet.
That is a huge happening across the dietary field. The USDA dietary guidelines really highlights the inclusion of soy products across all of its dietary patterns for healthy eating. The guidelines really define 6 core elements that make up a healthy diet: vegetables, fruits, grains, dairy, protein foods, and oils. And soy-based products are included in the 4 of the 6 core elements. So really having soybeans and soy-rich products included in such an influential document really is a significant step forward for us.
That is Mace Thornton with the United Soybean Board. He's been our guest on the Kansas Soybean Update. It's brought to you by the Kansas Soybean Commission.
Greg Akagi there. As always, Greg, many thanks. Coming your way next after the break, this week's horticulture segment. You're listening to Agriculture Today over the K-State Radio Network.
Social distancing slows the spread of coronavirus, so stay a minimum of 6 feet away from others and stay home if you can. More info at coronavirus.gov. Let's all do our part, because we're all #AloneTogether. Brought to you by the Ad Council.
Agriculture Today continues now with our weekly horticulture segment. And expressly for you produce growers who direct market to consumers or intend to do so in the future, food safety should be a high priority as you embark on such a project, and that's going to be the theme of a series of workshops co-sponsored by K-State Research and Extension quite soon. We've invited back in State Food Safety Specialist with K-State Research and Extension, Londa Nwadike, to go over the details of these and their importance. Londa, growers need to be astute in this area of food safety as they market directly their produce.
That's exactly right. So if you're selling fruits and vegetables and, any edible types of products like that, fruits and vegetables, you do have to always just be thinking about food safety, because a lot of fruits and vegetables are not cooked before they're consumed. And so the only step between you producing the food and the consumer is just that transportation step, getting it to the consumer. So it is really important that producers are just really thinking about food safety and, just trying to do all that they can to prevent any, foodborne illnesses that could potentially happen.
And in that vein, this series of workshops coming up, you've selected a host of topics to cover here, haven't you?
Yeah. So, in the past, we offered these workshops in person, of course, but in the past year or so, we've been offering them online. And actually, in some ways, it's really been nice to offer them online because that way people don't have to travel. So if the weather's bad, you don't have to worry about that. And you don't have to leave the farm at, really early hours in the morning to get somewhere. You can just go to your computer and join on your computer. So yeah, we really encourage people to take advantage of the variety of offerings that we have right now.
Well, let's do walk through what will be covered at these, and they'll get going with the first later this month and continue into the month of May. The first one will be about good agricultural practices, the food safety plan. That'll be offered 2 times. What's that going to be about, Londa?
Yeah, so that workshop, it's Good Agricultural Practices, or GAPS, is the acronym that we use. And that's something that a buyer might ask you to have. So it's not a regulatory requirement, but if you want to sell to like a grocery store, some grocery stores, or if you want to sell to a broker or wholesaler, he might ask you to have a GAPS certification in place. And so if they tell you you need to be GAPS certified, then this workshop can help you understand the paperwork that you need to have in place to be able to get GAP certified. So that workshop, we're offering it on February 24. And then again, just as a repeat of the same information will be on April 21. They're both from 3 to 5 p.m., so just a few hours, and we'll cover the basics of what you need for GAP's food safety plan.
On March the 5th, you'll have a Kansas produce safety update. Is that a broad overview of this topic?
Yeah, exactly like you said, a broad overview of produce safety best practices, regulations, so you'll know if you're covered by regulations or not. KDA and K-State Research and Extension will be presenting, and so we'll talk about resources that we have available. So it'll be a nice general overview in an hour's length of time.
Very good. Again, on March the 5th. Also in March, on the 18th and the 25th, to be precise, a longer form program on a couple of key topics here, including the Food Safety Modernization Act. That gets into the regulatory side of things?
Yeah, that's exactly right. So that training is one that it's a total of 8 hours of training. So we spread it out over 2 days so that you don't have to sit at your computer for so long each day. So it's about 4 hours of class time on both March 18th and the 25th. It's a training that is required by this regulation, by the Food Safety Modernization Act. A number of smaller fruit and vegetable farms will be exempt, but some farms, will not be exempt. And then that training is something that's required. So that training goes into more depth. It's 8 hours. So we cover worker hygiene, and then we cover soil amendments. We cover wildlife control. We cover water, post-harvest sanitation. So we'll cover kind of all the different things about safely raising produce over the course of 8 hours over 2 days.
Again, March the 18th and the 25th there. On March the 24th, wildlife control to protect one's produce.
Yeah, so, and I grew up on a farm myself. We know that when you're raising fruits and vegetables, wildlife are attracted to that. Right. And so we just want to provide this webinar. It'll be just a 1 hour session. Again, it's just kind of a brief overview in the evening. So the night of March 24 from 6 to 7 p.m. We'll be showing a lot of videos so that you can actually see some things that you can do to help control wildlife on your farm.
That on March the 24th. And the last session, this will be May the 10th. So a little later on, it'll look at post-harvest handling of produce.
Yeah, so this one is, again, kind of a introductory level, but we're covering, as you said, both just an introduction of produce safety and then also the post-harvest handling side. So we'll focus on what you can do to improve the quality and the shelf life of your produce, as well as the safety of your produce by handling it after harvest. So that one will be, just again, very practical, introductory level, just the basics that you should think about. But again, I think an important part of that one is it also will help with just how you can handle your produce after you harvest it to help it to have a longer shelf life, which is beneficial as well. So yeah, that one's on May 10 from 3 to 5 p.m.
Well, collectively, that's quite a series of informative sessions for those who are marketing directly to the consumer out there, and it will allow them to be well-versed in this area of produce safety. How does an individual take part? Yeah,
it's a great question. So you can contact, myself LNWADIKE at ksu.edu. You can email me, or you can also, on our website, you can register online. So if you go to our website, and your local extension office hopefully could connect with us as well. We can help them with the website too if you contact them also.
Very good. And by the way, that website is the K-State Research and Extension site. Look under food safety at ksre.ksu.edu. An outstanding series coming up here very soon with the first session this coming Wednesday, as a matter of fact, February 24th, on good agricultural practices and the rest to follow. Best of luck with these, Londa, and congratulations on putting all of this together. Thanks for telling us about it.
Yes, thank you so much for having me. Appreciate it.
Londa Nwadike is the State Food Safety Specialist, K-State Research and Extension. Again, your local extension folk can give you further guidance on taking part in any or all of these important workshops. That is this week's Horticulture segment, rounding out our Thursday edition. Thanks, as always, for tuning in. Eric Atkinson for Agriculture Today. This is the K-State Radio Network.